Students, let us start the second part of our chapter, the popular struggle and movements. Today, the topics which we will do is the pressure groups and movements. Now, what is pressure groups and movements? Pressure groups are organizations that attempt to influence government policies. Means it pressurizes the government either to change its policies or to change any kind of changes which are necessary for country's development. But unlike political parties, these pressure groups do not aim to directly control or share political power. These are actually organizations, as I told you in our last chapter, and it's a formal organization. So, in a formal manner, pressure groups do its work. Or the best example of pressure groups is the FATCO, which is from the Bolivian story. On other hand, movement, as we see in the story of Nepal, that's a movement. Now here in pressure groups there is a particular aim and they has to fix their aim, but in pressure groups there is no particular aim. Let me take the example of India's freedom struggle. Now India's freedom struggle is a movement. First of all, our aim was to get the administration of the state government. Means we only want the dominant status of Britain. Later, when Gandhiji starts his movement, we change our aim, and after all, in the year 1929, we decide at Lahore session to get the full independence or the total independence. In short, means there is no particular aim of movement. As movement goes, it joined new topics and it mobilized itself. Same as we see in the story of Nepal, where the movement was started by SPA, but later on many other parties joined this movement. Now, what is a pressure group and movement? We can understand it through three examples. Through 3 points. The first one is the movements are loose organizations. Means there is no particular organizations. It is not in a formal manner. No one organized it. But on other hand, the pressure groups is totally organized, as we see in the FATCO. Or we come to India, then the Women Commission, Human Rights Commissions, they all have their offices at district level, then at state level, and there is a National Women Commission in Delhi. So whatever they are doing, their work is systematically, means in a very organized manner they are doing their work, while movement is not a organized activity. Now the second point is that in movements the decision making is more informal and flexible. Means in movement the system of movement is totally informal. They are doing their work but not in a formal manners, and as I told you that they change their decisions also, their aim also. Means it is not a, there is not a fixed target of movement, it's a flexible. And the pressure group is just opposite of it. It is totally formal and there is a fixed target of it. Whenever it do it work, it basically do it work through applications, send it application first to the lower level, then to the higher level, and then to higher level. And basically the pressure groups do their work through negotiations, but in movements the, they basically show their power, and they all come on road. So that is the second main difference between pressure group and movement. Now the third and the last difference between pressure group and the movement is depends much more on spontaneous mass participation. Means here in movement they basically depends on spontaneously people participate this movement. Now the meaning of spontaneous means when people take decision and they themselves initially come and join the movements. मीन्स अपने आप उनके अंदर ये भावना पैदा होती है, वो स्पिरिट पैदा होती है, और वो अपने आप मूवमेंट को ज्वाइन करते चलते हैं वन बाय वन। और इस तरह से ये जो मूवमेंट होता है ये स्पॉन्टेनियसली एक मास लेवल का मूवमेंट बन जाता है। So this is how a small movement become a huge movement through a spontaneous mass participation of the people. As we see in the story of Nepal, it was actually started by SPA, but later on lawyers, doctors, students, government employees, and many other organizations, non-organizations, etc., they all joined the movement of Nepal. While in pressure group, it is totally depend on personal interest. It is actually also called the interest group, where those people join this movement whose interests are related to that particular topic. I hope the difference between pressure groups and movement is clear. Let me again remind you this. So let us see one by one. The pressure group work in an organized manner. It is totally do its work in an organized manner, while the movement is not work in a organized manner. We can see a very loose organizations in movement which can change their decisions according to time. The pressure group do their work totally in a formal manner, means through applications from lower level to upper level. But on other hand, this is not found in movements where the decision making is more depends on people. It is totally informal and flexible. And the third one is that a pressure groups works on its personal interest. People join it on their personal interest, means few people join it. That's why this one is also called an interest group. But on other hand, movement in movement we found that it is basically depends much more on the spontaneous mass participations of the people, where it's actually start in a very lower level. Slowly it was mobilized by many other organizations, NGOs, and people. So these three are the main difference between pressure groups and organization. Now let us come to our in the next part of the chapter discuss on interest. Now in interest groups, these interest groups are also divided into two parts. The first part is called sectional interest group. Now here the sectional interest groups means Usually, interest groups seek to promote the interest of a particular section or a group of society. Means particular group or societies see their own interest, and this is how they pressurize the government. For example, we will take the example of trade unions, business associations, professionals, lawyers, doctors, teachers, etc. Recently, there in Kota, the whole coaching institutes organized Kota Band in Kota. Through this, they pressurized the government of Rajasthan and central government to establish a, an IIT institute in Kota. But they pressurized the government and do this Kota Band not for the favor or welfare of the people of Kota, but their own interest, so that they can continue their coachings of IIT in Kota. Means this interest group is totally, this pressure groups is totally for the interest of the coaching groups of Kota. Similarly, many times we see the doctors declare strikes, the lawyers declare strikes. That's only for their personal interest. This is called the sectional interest groups. Means interest groups which is doing or pressurize the government for their or for a particular section only. The second one is called public interest group. This public interest groups is just opposite of sectional interest group, where the aim of the public interest group is the welfare of public. Means they want the welfare of the public of Kota, and we have the best example of public interest group is from India recently by the Anna Hazare group. The Anna Hazare and its team done Anshan and a movement in India, not for their own interest but for the interest of publics. And the age of Anna Hazare is more than 75 years. So whatever he was and he is doing is not for the interest of its own, but for the interest of the whole public of the nation. So that is the major difference between the sectional interest group and public interest group. The sectional interest groups means where they pressurize the government for their own interest, while in public interest group they pressurize the government for public's interest. So this is how we try to understand interest group. Now the second one is movement, which we already understand through the example of Nepal, and later on when we differentiate pressure groups and movements, as we see here. Now movements means the case of interest group or the group involved with movements also include in a very wide variety. Most of the movements are issue specific movements that seek to achieve a single objectives within a limited time frames, but the other are more general or generic movements that seek to achieve a broad goal in a very long term. The example or the best example is our freedom struggle, the freedom struggle of India's, where our first of all our aim was to be a good administration in India. Later on, we decide or we demand that we want our own government in our country, but as a dominant status. And then in the year 1929-30, we demand for the total independence of India. So slowly, our demands, the number of our demands raise, and also the time. Here in the book, The Nepal movement for democracy arose with a specific objective of reversing the king's order that led to suspensions of democracy. We can take other examples from India also like Narmada Bachao Andolan, as I told you, the example of Anna Hazare. That is what we done today in this chapter. Now, the thing which we will do in our next chapter is that how they influence the politics of India and is their influence healthy or not. That we will do in the third part of this chapter. For today, that's all. Thank you.